Hey everybody, it's Master Gallengeist here, bringing you my review for The Amazing Spider-Man Issue 1. And I overall really enjoyed this issue. It did a nice job of setting up Peter Parker's status quo at the moment. Now, granted, we get a kind of teaser for kind of what happens, and then we get like a 6-month jump. But we get it into pretty much a status quo where Peter is more down on his luck and we're trying to figure out what's happening. It does bring into certain contexts like Devil's Reign and what's going on with the Fantastic Four as well. So I did like that it had that kind of continuity of what's going on, and I just really liked the artwork and how they had a handle on Peter, even though Peter was doing certain things. And I'm like, nah, that's not that. I would not act that much of a dick, but. And granted, and I mean like a base level thing, like Peter usually doesn't act that much like a dick to people depending upon who's kind of writing him, and it's kind of balanced here. So, why must I talk about the first part first? Because you never know when some place is like, hey, that's in the middle of nowhere, but I'm near there and I go there. That's what I felt here, because we open up and we see outside York, Pennsylvania, and then we see Peter in this like crater thing going, gah, yeah, and like screaming about something, and he's got like a communicator thing, and I'm just like, hey, I've been there. Now, granted, not to a crater where Spider-Man's screaming about something and looks beat to shit, but I was just like, hey, that's kind of cool. Maybe he was trying to go to like Hershey, trying to figure out like how to get direct factory Reese's, like Dan Slott talks about. That's pretty funny. But yeah, it was kind of cool, and then we get this page of like 6 months later, and we then start pretty much getting into it. He's talking with Aunt May, and Peter's trying to tell her something, but she's pretty much like, she tried to stand by him these past couple months. She moved to like a smaller place. She doesn't like that he's like lying. Well, that he's lying to her. Let me see. That she knows that something happened to him, and he can't tell her what, and that she's kind of like, she does believe him, and that she'll always believe him, but it hurts when he like lies to her, and that she hopes that he'll come to dinner on Saturday, but she won't hold her breath for it. And then we get the dude coming to him about like bill collection for everything, because even though I haven't been reading Spider-Man, I liked to see, I kind of kept abreast that he got kind of like fucked up at a certain point, and Ben took over for him, and we've got that whole thing. So we'll see how that kind of works out. And he's kind of pissed off that the dude was getting in contact with his aunt for all that kind of stuff. And the dude's like, we'll be seeing you. So we've got that is going to be in the background as well. So it's nice to kind of see these kind of things lined up. Randy, of course, is kind of like pissed off at him because he hasn't been kept abreast of the situation of what's going on, having to like field the calls and everything, what's going on with the rent and all that. And Peter finally asks him, okay, Randy, what's up? And he's going to ask Janice to marry him. So it's like, oh, okay. Now, granted, even though I'm not that much up to date with what's going on with this, it actually, how it's laid out makes sense for me. So it's like, oh, okay. And it's not like exposition dumping, you know what I mean? Where it's just like, you get to a certain point, and it's just like, it's like, all right, I get this. And Peter's pretty much like, hey, that's really cool. It's good seeing you. And Randy's like, what the hell? And then he's, of course, going to ask her father's permission to marry her. So I'm like, oh, okay, we'll kind of see how that goes. But because of all the murders he's done, I'm like, murders? Okay. So we'll kind of see what goes on. And then ask Peter to kind of help him out, like, if it starts, like, to call him at a certain point to make sure that, like, he hasn't been murdered himself. And he just says, bye, Randy, as he, like, closes the door, and his face is like, oh, okay. And everybody keeps telling him that the beard isn't working. He's taking all like the pot shots and everything. He looks at like trying to call MJ or whatnot, but doesn't. and then sees the stuff about like Randy texting him and all that. It's like, all right, let's see how this is going. We then shift over and we see the Tombstone is like, we see that Rose, the Kingpin's son, has taken over and is trying to do a deal with Tombstone. And it's like he doesn't have a territory, so he doesn't deal with him, and pretty much bringing up that whole kind of stuff. And of course, Rose is pretty much trying to show his prowess and power, bringing out Digger, who brings up like the Green Door thing from like the Hulk and all that, because he is evidently gamma powered. I'm not that well versed with Digger, but what we see in here makes him a kind of interestingly weird character for me. Very much within Spider-Man's kind of mythos and rogues and everything like that. But he doesn't seem like the brightest, but definitely one you want to watch out for powerhouse-wise. And it's funny, Rose is like, enough with the Green Door, man. It's just, that was a kind of funny thing. And we've also got like a rabbit woman, who I am not familiar with whatsoever. So pretty much Rose is flexing his strength kind of bit and be like, hey, deal with my ass. And the rabbit woman's like, yeah, I got this, boss. And Tombstone's like, cool it. And of course, I think it's Hammerhead is like asking where he got the muscle. And he's like, hey, a friend of my daughter's, good kid, insane. So it's like, all right, that's pretty concise and just like figuring out what's kind of going on with this rabbit woman. And Rose then pretty much tries to get down to business. Like, I want the product. I'm offering a fair price. Just deal with me. And then he gives him a time limit and a place. And it's like, Harlem, isn't it customary to meet in the middle? Of course, Tombstone is still harping on the fact you have no territory, which makes sense. I mean, yes, you might have been bequeathed. Well, not bequeathed, but like Kingpin's like, you do your shit. But if you're going to do your shit, you have to take your own territory and shit. It's never going to be like handed to you. So Kingpin leaving like he did with Devil's Reign left a power vacuum that Rose is going to have to dig himself out with. You know what I mean? Get his own territory and all that. And Tombstone's just laying that out for him. And then he's like seeing if anybody doubts his words as we see like the rest of the kind of organized crime in New York is, I mean, like, yeah, we don't have any problem with that. Let's see here. So Peter's then figuring out about like going to help Randy out. He facilitates back and forth between taking the suit or not, cleans up, shaves, and we see that Johnny pops back. Pretty much, we see that it's back in this kind of situation. Peter tells him to like turn the heat down, but of course Johnny's like, hey, that's traumatic for me because he got like blasted by Doom and everything, and is kind of checking on Peter. And Peter, for some reason, is saying that like, the way I remember it, Reed and Sue don't want me coming around anymore. And Johnny lays the bomb that like he stole from them, man, stole from us, man. And he's like, I needed your help, and you needed people to look away. Look the other way while you screwed up your life. Were we supposed to let that happen? And Peter's like, fuck it, I don't care. I need to go check up on a friend. And then Johnny's like, what do you think I'm doing? And I'm like, it is cool to see that we've got Johnny involved and trying to figure out what's going on with Peter. But we get a lot of interesting interaction here, and I do like that. And I like how Johnny's looking in the art. So we'll have to see kind of how that shakes out with Peter and Johnny. How we'll learn what Peter stole, what that kind of factors into what's going on with the Fantastic Four at this moment, and why they... It had to be something kind of big and kind of weird for them to not help Peter out of it. So it'll be intriguing to see what we learn from that so far. Then we see Randy just awkwardly trying to ask permission for to marry Tombstone's daughter, and he starts bringing up let's see, like he's talking about like when he came up, you took, no one gave you nothing, so you didn't ask. And it starts freaking him out, and he's just like, lighten up, kid. We both know Janice is going to do whatever she wants anyway. Tombstone's talking about how he's feeling like he's on top, how he feels like he has enough. He would have like broke a kid like him for asking something like that back in the day. Um, and saying about how he doesn't want to get on his dad's bad side because he stabbed him with a pitchfork once. I'm like, what the fuck? Granted, I need a little bit more with that, but he calls over somebody, Ricky, for a bottle of cognac, and he's going to tell the kid a story. It's like, oh, that's actually kind of an interesting dialogue and an interaction here. Even though I'm not that well versed with the characters, it works out well enough to be like, Randy's really nervous. Tombstone is in a position where normally he says he would do this kind of thing, but he's like, hey, you know what? You're okay. I'm good. Let's do this. Peter's like, hey, all right, you pulled it off. And then he sees that the rabbit woman is going to do something, and Peter's like, yep, that's why I brought my suit. We, of course, get him in Spidey's outfit as he then just jumps on the car because he can't go through it because of like where they're kind of going. So he just kind of sees what's going on. So we see that they're dealing in like a goblin glider and everything like that. So it's like, that's interesting that they would have that kind of tech. And he's like, wow, you better like check the miles and everything on it. You could get burned on those things. And it's Spider-Man. It's interesting. Him just checking out on this is what kind of throws it into chaos. Though granted, he should be checking on these things because these are like organized crime people that are like dealing in like goblin tech and that shit you need to know. So one dude screams Digger to do stuff and like Peter's like, oh shit, I know that. But then he kind of gets grabbed and he's like, I've waited a long time for this. I'm like, I need a little bit more information on why Digger would need that. Peter's like getting close to getting passed out, but then he like rips the dude's fingers off and I'm like, holy Jesus, I know Peter can do that. And it's funny, Digger's like, our fingers, and he's like, you were choking me. I'm like, yeah. He's got the strength of a, like the proportional strength of a spider. He could have just fucking like did something else to pretty much take your ass out. I mean, and then he's like bringing up that the Rose said that you killed us last time, and he's like, no, I wore you out and you melted. There's a distinction. And I'm like, yes, I love that kind of Spider-Man dialogue. It just works so well. And Digger is adamant that that didn't happen, and Peter's like, whatever. So everything's trying to be a bust. Everything's kind of going nuts. People start shooting everywhere. Digger, like, tosses a truck that kind of, like, gets people screwed up. Peter actually saves some people from getting hit, including the rabbit woman. And then we see that, like, certain money's on fire. One of the people, the rabbit woman's like, tough day to be Kareem. And he's, like, stuck in one of the cars, pretty much dying. But Peter's like, you wait here. I'm getting him. Digger's afraid of melting, so he kind of runs away. Peter's able to get Kareem out, and let's see. This is, of course, where Rabbit brings up, like, Devil's Reign, that they're more liable to arrest you than to arrest me. And then he's like, yeah, yes, can I offer you some twit before I leave? And then he, of course, webs her up and Kareem, and then just kind of, like, bugs out of there. And he gets back to his place 4 hours later. Digger's almost as strong as the Hulk, and he only stopped him last time because he didn't know when to quit. That's interesting to get that kind of information that we got there. He tries to call MJ, and she tells him to kind of stop doing this and to not call her again. We then shift over to Tombstone in Harlem, where he's kind of got a cat and everything, which is kind of interesting as he's just getting the lowdown of what was kind of going on, what went down deal-wise between Tombstone and Rose. And he's pretty much saying that he's just making an excuse to make a move, and that Hammerhead's the one that's talking to him. And then he just goes back in, tries to get a drink, smells something weird, and then his house explodes. Like, boom. I'm like, yeah, that works out there. And then the one dude's like, I was thinking, I think we used too much fuel. We gotta go. And then Digger's like, hey, we're supposed to leave a rose or whatnot, but he fucking eats it instead. And then they throw another one or whatnot. No, one dude asks if they've got an extra rose, but we see that Tombstone has escaped from the explosion and also saved his cat. And I'm like, okay, I know you're an organized crime, but you do care about certain things. Then we just see Peter kind of dealing with his daily life, trying to find a job, do interviews, avoid the collections dude, eating breakfast for lunch. Then Tombstone brings Parker in because he wants him to get a message to Spider-Man. And Peter's like, I think he's got zero interest in teaming up with you. And that he's just pretty much saying that the whole thing going on with Rose and him is all Spider-Man's fault. And that he's going to teach him a lesson, and that he's his project now. And, of course, Parker pretty much talks about Spider-Man, saying that he's been dying for something. And I'm going to tell you you're coming, and he's going to love it. And then he's like, you're a weird dude, Peter Parker, get out of my car. And we see that we are near MJ's place. He kind of walks by, and somebody asks MJ if she's okay, and she says that she is, Paul, and that he couldn't hold them back any longer, as we see these kids as they rush in and call her Mommy, as she's hugging them and everything is great. It's like, what the fuck is going on there? That's a definite big kind of cliffhanger thing to kind of like end it on. It's like, all right, we better get some more information on what's going on with that. And then we see that Otto Octavius is talking about, like, he's already broken as such a diagram of his destruction is beneath me, and that he's pretty much just going to wait for him to get happy and then grab him by the throat and squeeze. And then somebody else is talking to him, and they want the schemes that Doc Ock would be doing to destroy him. And then we see the last shot being this, of some dude talking to Otto Octavius that I do not know. So, overall, I enjoyed this issue 1. I liked how it set up all the kind of different kind of character stuff going on. Had a nice feel to it. This is $5.99, so it's a little bit more expensive than usual, but granted, it is Spider-Man, so he's big for Marvel, and it's a #1, so I get it. And it is pretty big. We get a lot of good stuff out of it, a good read for it, and I do like how it was divided up. Like, we got a little action, but we got nice character interactions around there as well. It's a pretty balanced comic, and a good way to start off an issue 1 and a new arc. We have pretty much an overall kind of mystery of what happened outside of York, Pennsylvania. We got the 6 months later. We got other kind of things. Why is MJ having kids calling her mom and mommy and all that kind of stuff? What did he do to the Fantastic Four and Johnny and whatnot to have them mad at him, and what he was going to try and steal from him, and what's kind of going on now? Now, granted, we know that the main kind of thing is, we do know that there's going to be Ben probably have to be dealt with at some point because of how he kind of ended up with the whole Spider-Man and Beyond Corporation. But the biggest kind of thing is figuring out what's kind of going on here with Peter, and how he is going to deal with Tombstone and the whole kind of shifting of the power balance within New York's underworld, since Tombstone is fighting with Rose, and what's going to be happening out with there. So there are a lot of interesting kind of things in here. If you're into Spider-Man a lot, I would definitely recommend it. It's, granted, it's pricier, but it was an enjoyable read. And if you've been following Spider-Man up until this point, I think you'd probably get more out of it than I would. But if you're a newbie and you want to jump on for it, if the price doesn't deter you, I think you'd have a very enjoyable comic with some really nice art that I like. Now, granted, it's not for everyone. It's a distinct style for John Romita Jr., so if you like it, cool. If you don't, that's another thing. Like, it's your own. It's cool. So, yeah. Those are my opinions on the issue. Tell me what you guys think in the comments below. If you liked it, if you didn't like it, if you agree with me, if you disagree with me. Also, like and subscribe, and I hope you have a good day.